And President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump will arrive in Rome in just a couple of hours to attend the funeral. We now also know that President Biden and Dr. Jill Biden will be there. They are two presidents with very different relationships, personally and professionally, with the late Pope. For Trump, a Pope who publicly challenged his policies, from immigration to climate change. For Biden, a Pope who didn't always agree with him, but with whom he had a real connection.
If tragedy is a defining characteristic of Joe Biden's life, the loss of his wife and daughter in a car crash in 1972, the untimely death of his son Beau of brain cancer in 2015.
Beau should be the one running for president, not me.
Then this was a seminal moment of healing. At a cancer conference 5 months after Beau's death, Biden says Pope Francis asked to meet with him and his family.
And I wish every grieving parent, brother, sister, mother, father, would have had the benefit of his words, his prayers, his presence. He provided us with more comfort than even he, I think, will ever understand.
To understand Biden, those closest to him say, you must understand his lifelong connection to his Roman Catholic faith, but also what is perhaps his unlikely connection with Pope Francis.
You are the most significant warrior for peace I've ever met.
These are men that came into office, in a sense, with similar mandates to clean up their own houses. And I think because of that, in a sense, they found one another. They found ways to communicate despite their differences, where they had a sense of mutual respect.
The world's two most prominent and powerful Catholics with much in common, both known for their empathy, both finding their power later in life. Francis at 76, Biden at 78.
So help me God.
And both also content without the perks of power. Francis riding the bus as bishop, Biden with his affinity for Amtrak. But it's abortion and the Dobbs decision that illuminates how their personal closeness seemed to defy their differences. Biden's position, of course, is consistent with his party, but not his church. And here in Rome, the Pope suggested that Biden should think more carefully about what it means to be a Catholic. Biden's often reminded of that split when he attends weekly mass with anti-abortion protesters outside his church in Delaware. And yet on Francis's 2015 visit to the U.S., Biden stayed close, greeting him at the airport alongside President Obama, front row for his address to Congress, and there for the farewell in Philly, building a bridge with the Vatican that continued into Biden's presidency.
The Vatican's made no secrets about the fact that they consider their relationship with the Biden administration to be a much more friendlier and open relationship than they had with the Trump administration.
Biden had met with popes before, John Paul II at the Vatican in 1980 when he was a senator, Benedict in 2014, where Biden says he told the Pope to lighten up on American nuns accused of straying too far from their mission. But with Francis, there was a deeper relationship that for the Pope transcended their significant differences.
He focuses on the fact that they are both passionately devoted to combating climate change and their attention to the poor and helping migrants and immigrants. And he's not going to let the other elements interfere with what common grounds they have together.
In 2021, when Biden and Francis met again at the Vatican, the president gave the Pope a century-old handmade cloak, the box that held it inscribed with this Bible verse: "If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you."
Joining us now, Eugene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and an MSNBC political analyst. As I was reminded of the Pope and what he meant to Joe Biden in terms of his son, Beau, who, of course, died of cancer, I was also thinking earlier this week, I met with the parents of Hersh Goldberg Polin, who, of course, was the American-Israeli who was killed. And they talked about meeting so many world leaders who offered sympathy, but they said Pope Francis showed empathy. What is the power of empathy in the modern world?
Empathy is a very, very powerful force, Chris, and it's something. It's the way that Pope Francis used his papacy and his entire life as a priest. Really, he was almost a parish priest in St. Peter's, because he made the faithful feel, and non-Catholics feel, that he embraced them, no matter what differences they might have, including doctrinal differences or differences on various issues. He disagreed with President Biden, not just on abortion, but, for example, on gay marriage. Yet, Francis made clear that there is room in the church for LGBTQ people, and that gay unions could be blessed, not sanctified, but blessed within the church. He was a pope with open arms, and I think President Biden not only respected that and responded to it, but I think he felt very deeply that this was a good man and a good pope.
You know, the fact that President Biden and the Pope had differing views on any number of things, as you say, and that it didn't impact their personal closeness, took a lot of notice within the church, within the religious community. And I think some people liked it more than others. But the fact that they could work together on the issues that they both care about, is there also a message for today's political landscape?
I sure hope so. I hope so, and I think both of them hoped so. That by example, they showed there is room for disagreement, yet cooperation. That those two things, disagreement and cooperation, were not mutually exclusive, and that we could all agree on a certain humanity and a certain empathy. We could all agree that we want we want to end suffering, that we want to end hunger and poverty, that we want to end war, and then we could talk about how we do these things, but we could agree on those basics.
So when you get beyond the basics, and I think there's this intangible thing, right? I've had people ask me, why so much attention to a pope from one religion? And obviously, he's the leader of nearly 1.4 billion Catholics. He's the most recognizable religious leader in the world. But not every pope has gotten the kind of attention that John Paul or Francis has gotten. What do you think it is that has the appeal that has transcended people of faith?
Well, first of all, the popes you mentioned, John Paul and Pope Francis, in their way, they were both very strong personalities, very different personalities, but very strong personalities in that they were sort of pure and complete representations of their belief system, and they were both in their way men of action. Pope Francis, of course, was the first pope from Latin America, the first pope from the Southern Hemisphere. So there was an affinity there with many people around the world that I think we don't fully appreciate. I think that was a very deep connection that many Catholics around the world felt with him because of those qualities, because of his beginnings, and then beyond that, because of the way he represented the poor and the dispossessed, and those sort of on the outside, and he called for more equality, a better sharing of the bounty of the earth and the bounty of the world economy, that included those who at the moment are left out. And I think that was just really important to many people, and not just Catholics around the world, but people really identified with this Pope.